Hello and welcome to CVG's special Xbox One U-Turn Bulletin. I'm joined by Tim Weaver.
Hello.
Dan Dawkins, both of whom editors previously of Xbox World. I'm Tim Clark. Lads, we've all been working in games journalism for, I'd say, over a decade. Have you ever seen anything quite like this?
No, I haven't. I mean, I was completely sandbagged by it last night when it came on. I thought it was beyond the realms of possibility that they would backtrack to this degree. I thought they might make some compromises, but I never thought that they would get to the stage where they're like, "All right, you have it your way."
Dan, break down exactly what they've rode back on.
Okay, well, they've driven back to almost a state that we've got already, essentially. That's the key thing to point out. Now, you no longer require an internet connection to play offline Xbox One games, so that ridiculous check-in every 24 hours is gone. You can now trade in, lend, resell, gift, as in give a present, and rent disk-based games just like we do today. So that's exactly the same as we've got. Now it says you can also download games from Xbox Live on day of release, which is, I think, is what they were proposing anyway. The thing is now, if you download a game, you don't have you can play them offline basically. So you don't have to be online to play a downloaded game. Now also, downloaded titles cannot be shared or resold, which is just like now, just exactly like now. And as we just discussed a minute ago, if you buy a disc-based game, you need the disc to be in the tray when you play it. Otherwise, as we discussed, you could give the disc to your mate once you've installed it.
Once you've got it installed.
Installation is still mandatory, as I understand it.
So Dan, do you read this as essentially Sony called their bluff and Microsoft's had to blink?
I think Microsoft... I've seen so many narratives played out on Twitter and social media. I think essentially, for everything you say about it, whilst is it unprecedented? Yes, almost. Is it expected? Well, I think it probably was.
Well, I was saying earlier, yeah, I mean, we did a number of shows over E3 where we discussed this sort of stuff, and coming off the back of it, I think the talk was that on Amazon, for instance, PS4 was outselling Xbox One or out pre-ordering Xbox One to a ratio of 7-1, and given that you have PS4 going on the Jimmy Fallon show in the US and being cheered just for not being an Xbox, essentially, that situation was untenable, and at that point Microsoft had to act. And I think it's quite... I almost think I don't think it's surprising they've acted quickly, because this now gives them a matter of months, before the November release, for almost the issue to kind of go away now and slip out of the public perception.
That's true, but I mean, at the same time, you've got to think about how long they've had this in the planning. I mean, how long have they been planning this model of console? Years?
In terms of the always-on stuff?
Yeah, years.
Well, what version is it even of that? Because you've got to think there was probably an even stronger...
Yeah,
I mean, 24 hours a day version.
Yeah, I mean, I've got quite strong feelings about this, as I think it seemed to be clearly the intention that they were planning to produce an always online console. There's a lot.
Poor old Adam Orth, that cost him his job.
He dealt with it, and now Microsoft have to deal with the fallout of the thing they've created. They had what seemed like a clear vision for what the future should be, an always on connected vision, which would affect the marketplace and the way you buy and connect games. There is a scenario where that can completely work. It wasn't that dissimilar to what works on Steam right now on PC.
But the big difference is Steam has natural competitors that force it to sort of stay honest in terms of its pricing.
Exactly.
What Microsoft was trying to do was effectively drown pre-owned games in the bath before they were ready to go and live on the farm with Jesus, to use two separate death metaphors.
What I thought was it was an opportunity to do was to create like a true online marketplace with really clear, transparent pricing structures, so that the problem at the moment is you've got £40 games, a handful of them survive. Everyone's scared of like risky new IP and the cost of it. And the pre-owned market was sort of supplementing that. You could have created a transparent online marketplace with proper pricing, like let's say £15.
You could have, but was there any suggestion they were actually going to do that? Because when when people were saying to them, well, how much are these used games going to cost? They were sort of going, the same as new ones.
Exactly, but they could have been transparent. They could have said exactly what they said. They could have said, look, the cost of reactivation is £1, £2, £3. It will always be that. The cost of a game that's new is this. The cost of a game that's 2 months old is that. It will work on perfectly transparent supply and demand.
But they need to sell physical machines, and to do that, they had to go essentially to all the shops. Screw you guys! It was never going to. They were never going to work.
That's the key point.
But isn't that the whole problem with Xbox One? Is that it all comes down to the terrible job they've done of PRing and marketing it so far. All this stuff that Dan's talked about, and all the stuff we knew that the Xbox One was going to attempt to do. I'm not saying that it would have sat well with consumers, but if they PR'd it properly and they'd had a coherent PR message and sent it out to the market with a coherent PR, they could have got some of that
When
stuff
I
through.
think they had a message and it was just unpalatable.
No, they had a message,
yeah, but when did they ever sell it as a benefit?
Exactly,
to
and
us?
also
What are the benefits?
all their executives, none of their executives knew what each other were saying.
Well, the benefit was exactly that. It was like Steam. People love Steam, right? Because it's got this great, vibrant marketplace
I
with
think
actual
people
Steam sales.
People like Steam for other reasons. They copied the worst bits of Steam, not the best bits.
yeah,
That
but
was the thing.
Yeah,
That
but
was-
they could have made it and sold it a better system. They could have made a truly competitive online marketplace. They failed to do that.
So the other
And
thing,
now it's gone.
The other thing, there's another narrative doing the rounds, which in fact the editor of CVG, Andy Robinson's got a blog up at the moment about it, saying that we have lost like a kind of a perhaps more progressive vision of the future. Well, not progressive is probably the wrong word, but an interesting vision of the future, because Microsoft was sort of banking on doing this cloud-based stuff. That will now by necessity have to go away a bit because developers won't know whether you're online or not necessarily. Won't be able to rely on it. Do you think anything's been lost there, Tim?
Yeah, I think
By that?
I think an opportunity has been lost, and a lot of the features that the developers were talking about at E3 relied on that kind of cloud structure, and that is, whether we like it or not, that is eventually going to be the future. That is where it is going, and maybe at the moment it's not going to be. And they've made this huge U-turn, and it looks like we've kind of gone back to square one. But I think they will stealthily now start pushing some of that stuff through.
See, this is where I think there's like a misunderstanding. So I don't think there's anything to stop them using still that cloud stuff and
There'll
going,
be an option.
do you know what? If you want this stuff, you're going to
Yeah.
need to be on. You
Absolutely.
need to be online. In the same as if I want to play Halo multiplayer, I need to be online.
There'll be an
Like,
option.
Destiny is an online game. You have to be online to be playing it with other people. So the
the
cloud
div-
functions are
The
available.
Division will be on both machines,
Yeah.
and it will be an MMO which you require to play online. So if they want to use their cloud stuff,
And I
they
think
can.
even within games that don't require that level of online functionality, I think there'll be an option. Like you think about stuff like Forza 5's Drivatar and all that sort of stuff.
I'd rather not.
Yeah, but if you're not online, how do you use Drivatar? So that within Forza, something like Forza 5, they're going to have to. They're either going to have you can have a Drivatar or you can't have a Drivatar, and whether they've built that in at the
I'm
moment
sure
or not, I
there
don't
are smart
know.
guys out there. I'm sure you could be playing offline. It will record the stuff, and then next
Oh
time
no,
you
I'm
go
sure,
online,
but not to the
there are ways
same,
around
not
it.
to the same degree. I don't think.
So just to wrap up, then, Cliffy B said this wasn't a victory for the punters. This was a victory for Sony. But do you agree with that? Or, I think this is one of the best examples in my memory, anyway, of like the specialist press explaining something properly to people, what the ramifications of something were going to be, and then people going, do you know what, we don't like this, and lobbying for change.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I just absolutely believe it came down to two very different PR messages. Sony's was they didn't have to try that hard because Microsoft cocked it up so badly, but also their PR message was very consumer focused and consumer facing, and I think that they won E3 simply by not being Microsoft. And I think that it's not a victory for Sony. I don't think in some ways it's a victory for anyone, because I think a lot of that functionality and stuff is quite interesting and probably where it will go. But I do have reservations about it, and I'm sort of impressed by Microsoft having come back and said, all right, we got it wrong. We're going back to square
Dan,
one.
does it put Microsoft back in the game?
Of course it does, because it now gives them equivalence with PlayStation, equivalence with what we've had for 7 to 10 years. We've just stayed exactly where we are after a 6-month phony war played out purely as pantomime for social media. And
You love it.
yeah, I love it. It's brilliant. It's what we're here for. But I just think it's gone around in circles for no reason. And there was a chance to create something genuinely new and to sell that vision to people. I don't buy as
This
well.
is madness. I can't believe you two are effectively
No,
defending the
the-
old system.
Not defending it. I'm just saying that I think there was. I agree with Dan. I think
There
there
was
was
scope to do something
was
that they failed to do.
but they just PR'd it so terribly.
Final question: will they drop the price as well? Yes or no before release?
Yes.
Weaver.
They're going to have to.
Clark also says yes. Thanks for watching. We'll be back as more things happen.